Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. It is Monday, June 7th. I'm Rob Fowler, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, and my co-host for this briefing is Brian Calley, our president. And this briefing is brought to you by Health Screen and Healthy Visitor. So long as we still have the requirement to screen employees and visitors, we recommend Health Screen and Healthy Visitor. You can find out more at healthycomply.com. Brian, some news earlier today that MIOSHA is offering a new set of grants. They'll look a little bit familiar to those who were paying attention before. They're safety grants really for PPE and safety equipment, $2 million starting today. And the window closes on June 18th, a week from Friday. Kind of something, a little bit of a throwback. Maybe the state has some extra money laying around, or what's going on here?
Really, this is, I think to put it bluntly, this is leftover money from the CARES Act. So before, the CARES Act said everything had to be spent by the end of the year and by the end of last year. And then the stimulus bill that was signed in December extended that deadline out. So now this pot of money from last year can be spent all the way through to the end of this year. So these federal funds that have been kind of sitting around lapsed for a while, they're going to go ahead and deploy in the form of the safety grants. Now, they did this before, and this is actually the amount that was left over from the previous grant process. The important thing to remember about this is that you can go backward. So there aren't too many expenses moving forward in terms of new expenses for COVID-19 safety measures. But what these grants allow you to do is apply for reimbursement to expenses you already laid out between the beginning of this year and today. So it could be pretty useful. I think that why not go ahead and apply if you've had COVID-19 related safety expenses during calendar year 2021.
And up to $10,000 per grant, and you have to be under 250 employees to be eligible. All right, we have an awesome guest on today, so let's get right to it. Kevin Stotts is the president of an organization called Talent 2025. If you're in West Michigan, you may know this organization. If you're not, you may not. Kevin, welcome, and let me just ask you to maybe tell us a little bit about Talent 2025.
Yeah, well, thank you, Rob, for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with you. Kevin Stotts, President of Talent 2025. We are a CEO-led organization in Western Michigan focused on improving the quality of talent. On the west side of the state, we cover a 13-county region, sort of the labor shed for West Michigan, running from Big Rapids and Ludington down to Grand Rapids over to Greenville, Berry County, and then to the Lakeshore. And so our goal is to really sort of work with education workforce leaders in K-12 and higher ed and workforce development to align that talent system to the needs of employers now in the future. And so in that work, we do a lot of research and data collection and analysis on strategies, be it public policy, funding, and things that employers can be doing specifically to help to contribute to the quality of talent in the west side of the state. And a lot of times that puts us up in contact with statewide issues. It's how, of course, Rob, you and I and Brian have come to know each other. So I appreciate the opportunity today. And then joining me on this for this presentation is Alex Andrews. Alex is our Director of Labor Market Information and Workforce Innovation. So he might jump in with a couple of questions or a couple of answers to some questions as we go through this.
Well, thanks so much, Kevin, for joining us today. And I invited you on because I saw some great work that you guys had done in making some, really identifying, putting some real definition around the problems that we're facing with labor shortages today, and then making some recommendations for the future that I think are very well aligned with many of the directions that SBAM has been investigating and advocating for as well. So please move. Why don't you go ahead and just move to your presentation here, and then we'll have a little discussion afterwards.
Yeah. So I'm going to go quickly, and what you're going to see is kind of a sort of highlights from a memo that we did, which actually Brian saw when we were looking at a lot of the issues concerning, how do we get people back to work, and what are some of the underlying structural challenges that need to be addressed as we sort of come out of this pandemic. You're certainly seeing a ton of job postings really sort of everywhere, with incentives and bonuses for employers were offering. And so at the same time, we were hearing that like a lot of states we're hearing that the pandemic unemployment benefit of that the federal government was having a sort of a negative effect on people finding work. And so we did a lot of work and research on what the relationship is and what we might do about it. And we've really been focusing on talent strategies to accelerate the recovery. And so those have been focused on getting people back to work, stabilizing childcare providers, because as people go back to work, they're going to need childcare available. And then addressing some of the education and workforce challenges and sort of training needs that we have within our workforce, and how do all those three sort of intersect. So just real quick, a lot of people don't know is that 1 in 8 adults in West Michigan don't have a high school diploma or a GED. That's 600,000 people across Michigan. And then they represent about 5.6% of the labor force, but were 20% of those who were dislocated during the pandemic, and their unemployment rate today is 3 times higher than sort of the rest of the unemployment population. So they have feel a disparate impact because of their low skill, low education. And then if you look at, and there's been a lot of news about this, the federal government's pandemic unemployment benefit, which when it was introduced in March of 2020 was $600 that the feds were putting on top of the state unemployment benefit. That was reduced down to $300, but still, you could be making $16.55 an hour, or the equivalent of taking those benefits and then therefore not needing to work. And so employers are essentially having to compete with that to get people back into the labor market. And what's concerning for us, looking at what happened the Great Recession, is we know that the longer people stay on unemployment, the more their skills degrade. There's certainly a dignity of work and providing for yourself and your family. And so it doesn't do anyone good when there's people on unemployment and there's a large number of jobs that are going unfilled across the state. And so we put together some strategies that kind of inclusive of how do we address these two big challenges. So, real quick, this is a slide looking at some of the labor market on both unemployment and labor force participation rate. Unemployment, we all get that. That's the orange bars on this graph, and you can see that
Kevin, it's actually not advancing. We're still on the strategies for Michigan's workforce, at least what I can see.
Oh, okay. I don't know why it's not advancing. We caught up? Maybe not.
No, mine hasn't changed. Rob, how's yours?
So let me stop sharing. Let me try resharing that again. Maybe that will have an effect. Anything yet?
Not yet.
How about now?
No.
Oh boy. Well, I'll see if we can. Maybe it'll kind of catch up for us in a quick moment. So I'm going to have Sarah try offering to share her slides. So I'll exit out of it and she can jump in and try to share those slides right now. So there we go. So we're at slide 3, Sarah. So as you're pulling this up and you go to the full screen, the orange bar is the unemployment rate. And you can see now as the last numbers we had, I think April's just came out, we've almost gotten back to the same level of unemployment that we had just before the pandemic and the unemployment associated with it. You can see sort of the high unemployment in April and May. We also look at labor force participation rate, and that is the number of able-bodied adults who could be working and either in the workforce or either looking for work. And that's the issue that we're also very concerned about. It's not just unemployment; it's also you have to have a large number of people looking for work. And as you look at the data, you see a lot of people still have not re-entered the labor market, either taking a job or looking for work. And we attribute a lot of that to this expanded unemployment benefit. When you can be making $16 an hour by taking these benefits instead of working, it takes a lot for you to sort of want to go back in the labor market, because you might have to pay transportation costs, childcare costs, et cetera. And so there's a lot of demotivating factors that are keeping people out of the labor force. But employment is largely recovered. I think the gap between now and what it was before the pandemic is about 375,000 people still that are unemployed who could have been employed compared to say February of 2020. Next slide, please. And then if you look at demand for employers, this is looking at online job postings. Demand is actually eclipsed where it was in January of 2020. So huge gains from a year ago. Employers, as we all know, driving down any street, you can see the signs outside of manufacturers and retail operations, et cetera. There's really a high demand for workers. And that's showing up in gains in wages. And so next slide, please. And so as a result, you're seeing this sort of massive gain in wages. You look at goods producing occupations, sort of the greatest increase at 7.3% over the past year. Think of manufacturers, agriculture, et cetera, any operation that produces something. And then you can see sort of private sector service occupations, still large gains, et cetera. And so a lot of times you'll hear people say that, well, wages haven't risen. Well, wages have risen actually quite dramatically over the past year in response to the need to pull people back in the labor market or compensate them for working during the beginning of the pandemic. And that's continuing today. And so the fact that, and then as I said before, employers are finding they have to compete with that unemployment benefit to get people back into the labor force. And so they're having to do that quite dramatically. Next slide, please. So then moving on, and we're going to send, I think the team is going to send out this slide deck to everyone who's on this call. If you look at where the gains in wages have been the greatest, that they've been amongst those people, those occupations that require the lowest amount of skill and education. So employers really sort of responding by trying to offer higher wages in order to draw people back in. Again, they're having to compete with that pandemic unemployment benefit. And you can see really some dramatic rises in wages over the past year, especially in manufacturing, leisure, hospitality, transportation. Where it hasn't grown has been in those occupations where the workforce could work the most remote. They could work remote. And so you haven't seen that demand because those wages are higher. Those people didn't face sort of the unemployment that those folks in the lower wage, low education, low skill job categories were. And so employers are really doing their part by offering not just higher wages, but bonuses, signing bonuses, other incentives in order to draw people back in the labor market. And those bonuses don't get sort of caught up in the data that's being recorded. They don't get seen as being a part of that increase in wage. So you think about some of the bonuses you're hearing about today, $500 or $1,000 for a sign-on bonus. That's not being captured in these rising wages. Next slide, please. And then, as an example of this is looking at data from one staffing agency whose 4,000 placements among 150 different employers in West Michigan, sort of the light industrial category. So again, goods producing occupations. And you can see sort of where the wages were in terms of placements and what those wages were right at the beginning of the pandemic, so Q1 2020, and you can see that progression to the Q2 of 2021, pretty substantial in terms of wage growth as employers continued to try to attract people back into the labor force. And again, that labor force number actually has gone down and hasn't really kind of caught up, even though unemployment has gone up over the past 12 months since a year ago last year. And so still having difficult time getting people back into the workforce. And that's why you're seeing the incentives that are out there today. So next slide, please. So what we've detailed is, not just a matter of how do we address the pandemic unemployment benefit that the federal government offered beginning on is what sort of the set of recommendations that we can, one, get people back to work and begin to strengthen our workforce. So we put together 8 recommendations. I'll go through those quickly. One is we've been calling for the state to end the enhanced employment benefit on June 27th, offer a bonus to unemployment insurance recipients after 4 weeks. So if they go back in the labor market, in the workforce, give them a bonus like other states have been doing of $500 to $1,000. So that's another incentive. We have been calling for a while to allow for the pursuit of a high school diploma as part of the work search requirement. Doesn't do some people any good in the long term if they don't have a high school diploma to go back in the workforce and then not be able to get a higher paying job because they don't have the education skills. So while they're unemployed, let's help them get that GED or a diploma very quickly in a matter of a couple of months, 6 months or so. And then allow them to enter the workforce, at least with a high school diploma or a GED. For employers, we've been really calling for the expansion of Going Pro, or having a Going Pro type program for those people who don't have the high school diploma or a GED, but who are in the workforce. Going Pro has been incredibly effective because it's really sort of demand driven. And it's difficult to get people who are working to sort of go back to school. And so how do you do that and provide a program where they can get that GED or diploma in the workplace? We want to sort of expand or require work search after 21 days after you've been unemployed. And then some other strategies that really kind of improve the quality of the sort of analytics and the process by which the Unemployment Insurance Agency sort of networks with the Michigan Works agencies across the state and does a better job of communicating and networking both unemployment insurance and then the Michigan Works agencies, which is essentially sort of the employment effort for the state of Michigan. I'll say 2 things are bolded here. One is on that work search requirement to be satisfied with if you're pursuing a high school diploma. The state agency just made that change within the past week. So we'll take credit for that because that was not part of the allowable exemptions with the Unemployment Insurance Agency as a couple of weeks ago. And then there's a lot of effort right now. In fact, there's legislation right now to require work search within 21 days of being unemployed and having to go and register with the Michigan Works agency in your area. So we're pretty optimistic on that as well. But these are the 8 recommendations we put forward. So much more than just ending the pandemic unemployment benefit. I think 22 states have done that. And the states have done that. They actually saw a 5% increase in job applications immediately as a result of that. So those are the recommendations, some data behind them. And Brian, I'm happy to take some questions from you or those on the call.
All right, great. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate the work on this and really kind of the global look at things. I wanted to make sure we didn't kind of gloss over the that stat that you just kind of finished up there with, was that about half of states have taken this approach of not extending the unemployment benefits all the way through to when the maximum period of time that the federal government will allow. Really have seen a pretty substantial, and I guess you could even say immediate bump in people out there looking for work. 5%, I think.
Yes, 5%. Yeah, I think CNBC did an article on that last week.
Yeah, it really is it's since getting past the reopening questions and, expanding capacities, we got a date certain when all the capacity restrictions are lifted. This has quickly risen to the top or the number one concern: lack of workforce. So, and of course, in West Michigan, it's always been a hot labor market for going back now. It seems like about 10 years, really, when we first started hearing about these types of issues. In those charts where it showed the difference in rising wages, and I appreciate you showing that, how far industries have gone to try to match the demand and the need to make it worth it for people to come back. At least anecdotally, what we're hearing around the state, and maybe share with me whether or not this is the same there, is that even substantial raises in starting wages, far beyond what the unemployment equivalency is with 1655 or is still not really enticing people back, suggesting that first of all, there are a lot of different factors, but also competing with 20 weeks off, might be the big thing, other than, wages get to 20, 22, $25 an hour. Even the incremental benefit of going back to work is dramatically diminished by the fact that there's a $16.55 an hour option that's just out there.
Definitely. Because I think Alex from my team has done some analysis or seen some research that and actually it's around $20 an hour to really start to induce people to come back, because not only do they have that benefit, and it's the beginning of summer, and we all love summer, which is also an incentive. Well, maybe I'm not going to go back to work right away. But you also had, we've had the stimulus checks, we have had tax returns. So there's a lot of cash that some are sitting on or have been able to sort of get by on for quite some time. And so there's a lot of factors contributing to sort of, this disincentive to work. When the pandemic unemployment benefit was first offered, it was in response to the very high unemployment and a concern that the people had for their safety around going back to work, that it wasn't safe for them to be out in public. Well, employers have proven that it's actually safer to be at work than it is in a lot of communities. The pandemic, the threat of the pandemic is largely dissipated and continues to dissipate. So the concern over health has sort of gone away, and that was one of the reasons. And then the high unemployment was the other reason. Both of those have now gone away. So the rationale to keep it any longer than is necessary has really sort of gone away as well.
Yeah, Kevin, I have a feeling we could talk with you for another hour, although we don't have that time left on our briefing. So I just want to thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the proactive recommendations in particular. I think that was helpful to have. You've been at this work long enough that those recommendations are something for our policymakers to think pretty seriously about. So thanks for your work there. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to move on to a couple of other things. So thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. You guys are a great partners. So I appreciate the great work of SBAM. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Brian, it's Monday. Data is usually a topic we talk about on Mondays, but let's maybe the punchline on this one rather than spend any time on the data itself.
Yeah, so everything's still going in the right direction. We see the numbers, actually the caseloads getting down below 500 cases a day, which you have to go back to a year ago, June of last year, before you see numbers like that. We've seen several days now where the percent positive has come in under 3%. That's where the epidemiologists really believe that the virus is in retreat. And we see hospitalizations and deaths both falling very, very sharply from their peaks. So everything in the right direction. Among vaccinations, they kind of leveled off now at about 100,000 new vaccinations per week, new first shots per week. While that's a lot less than it used to be. Um, I'm pretty satisfied with that. I think if we can keep that pace up through the summer, it puts us in a place where by early fall, we've got the level of vaccination in this state similar to Israel. And Israel, I think, is the gold standard in terms of herd immunity. And so you got vaccinations. If you could have that many vaccinations plus natural immunity from people that have already had the virus, you put those things together, the numbers in Israel show that that you really do reach that point where you get darn near close to eradication of the virus.
So I want to return to the topic we were just talking about with Kevin. And we've been talking about this issue of competing with the unemployment system, but maybe let's put it into perspective a little bit. Kevin mentioned 22 to 25 other states have discontinued the federal unemployment expansion. If we did nothing, if the state of Michigan didn't discontinue that, how long does it go?
It goes through to the beginning of September. So that's when the federal government in the most recent stimulus act had extended out the benefits. And so first week in September is when they would naturally go away. But as Kevin had mentioned, about half of states around the country have either already discontinued it or they have a date in place where it will be discontinued before getting to September. So that's really where the advocacy is coming in. Obviously, our governor has asked the legislature to expand unemployment benefits. So the idea of that just naturally happening here is smaller, but there are a lot of issues on the table. You got a budget on the table. Who knows? Maybe there will be some sort of a deal worked out before then. But I'm looking at this as it's an uphill battle to get our state to discontinue these benefits. But that's why it's all hands on deck, because we need the workers.
And apparently the governor has essentially said it's off the table. That doesn't mean it can't come back on the table, but off the table means not likely. The other element here is there's some talk in Washington about extending it beyond September 4th. What do you think the likelihood is of that?
Yeah, there are definitely members of Congress and the Senate that would like to see unemployment benefits expanded beyond the beginning of September. And but the Biden administration has kind of distanced themselves from that and have indicated that that they will not try to expand benefits beyond then. I think that they can feel that, first of all, the country is moving on, but also there's an orientation toward jobs in the economy now. And what they've seen are 2 months in a row of job growth coming in below expectations. So not terrible job reports, but kind of anemic. There are based on job postings, they estimate how many new jobs will be created in the future. And month over month, those are coming in now lower than expected. And most economists agree that it's the shrinkage in the size of the labor force that has resulted in those disappointing jobs numbers. And so I think that they're looking at it like their own political futures now might be tied to preventing further deterioration in the size of the workforce available to take these jobs that are being created.
Well, and I think, in Michigan, then the context of this is somewhere between 700,000 and 1 million people still on unemployment. The same sort of thing. It's disappointing jobs reports because of worker shortages, not because of lack of demand. And it really does paint a picture where the economy isn't going to get back on its feet until this very issue gets solved.
Yeah, that's really the disconnect that is so frustrating right now for people that are in a position there's demand for what they do and are having a hard time getting the workers in order to get up to full speed or full production. When you have over the last month, in any given week, there were between 700,000 and 1 million people on unemployment. Yet, if you look at the unemployment rate in our state and figure how many people are unemployed, you'll find that it's that those two numbers don't match, right? How many people are on unemployment and how many people show as unemployed in the numbers. That means that there's a lot of people that really aren't looking for work, because you don't count as unemployed unless you are looking for work, actively looking for work. And that is I think that's the disconnect. And until there are some changes, as Kevin mentioned, there are some worker skill issues, there are childcare issues, there are transportation issues, but ultimately this unemployment, the federal subsidy, the federal unemployment benefit on top of the state benefit has resulted in a scenario where the number of people on unemployment exceed the number of people that are looking for work.
Yeah. All right. Related, the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, we often refer to them as LEO. So that's who we're talking about, has put up a portion of their website, kind of a one-stop shop with resources, some sort of immediate term, some longer term in this area of workforce. Seems like some helpful stuff in there.
Yeah, so what they've done is they've taken all of these different aspects that can contribute to solutions for employers for workforce shortages, and they put them together on one page. So it's actually quite helpful. I think it's something I'd recommend people take a look at. I think I sent the link over to Sarah, maybe put it in, she could put it in the comments, but it's the Michigan Works Agency, Pure Michigan Talent Connect, the MIOSHA Ambassador Program, the unemployment system, virtual job fairs, the WorkShare program, vocational rehabilitation, global talent solutions. I mean, it just goes on and on. There's a lot of things there worth taking a look at and checking it out, because there'll be some things, I promise you, there'll be some things that you haven't seen before that are out there. And but ultimately, the first thing on the list is the Michigan Works Agency, and it's been really interesting to watch Michigan Works Agency come to the table and say, we need work search requirements added back. Not only that, but they're asking for the legislature to mandate that people come in and register in person in Michigan Works agencies, and because they feel that that's what makes it real. That puts the accountability in the work search requirement. So there is now active legislation on that front. But that really, you see an agency stepping out in this case saying, hey, look, there's so much demand. We're hearing from employers all over the place. Reinstitute this requirement that people on unemployment come into the Michigan Works Agency, get registered for work and work search, and then you have some real accountability behind the requirement to be looking for a job.
All right. Well, we'll stay on top of this issue, both with our advocacy and making sure that our members understand what the resources are out there. On Thursday, we'll spend a little time talking about a kind of an innovative childcare program called TriShare, and we'll unpack that one a little bit and learn a little bit more about it. I just want to remind you that the SBAM annual meeting, this is our big member meeting of the year, is next week, June 15th and 17th. It's a virtual meeting. Goes from 1 to 3:30 in the afternoon on both of those 2 days. It's not too late to register. We'd love to have you join us. There's some parts of it that are interactive. It's educational. It's maybe slightly entertaining. The theme is navigating the road ahead as we kind of look post-pandemic. So hope you can join us for that. Thank you for being here today, and we'll see you on Thursday.
See you on Thursday, everybody.